I've been on the National Committee since 2016 for almost 5 years now. I am the longest serving member and the current chair. And so I've seen a lot of what Tony's been talking about, the ups and downs of the period between 2016 and 2020, as we found that all the discussions that we had about where we went after the 2016 elections, where do we go from here? And we rebuilt and created the Carol Patel campaign. And the National Committee was really at the forefront of all of that. So I want to tell a little bit about what the National Committee is. It has 9 members. Originally, it was elected by all of the voting members. But in 2019, it was decided that the National Committee members would be elected by delegates, who in turn would be elected by party members from 4 different regions. There's a North, South, Midwest, and West region. And so those delegate conventions, again, will be coming up in April, I believe, and then there'll be a convention in June. Thus far, it's been entirely online, even before COVID. We're hoping that by 2022, we can have an in-person option for people to go to those conventions. Generally, members of the National Committee have 2-year terms, with about half of the committee elected at each June convention. National Committee members meet every month, and they make decisions about a range of topics, including funding for campaigns and ballot access, state chapter status and guidelines, the web and social media operations teams, and partnership with outside groups. So in those National Committee meetings, we honestly don't talk a lot about politics or policy itself. It's really a lot of that administration work to make sure that the party is functioning. So the meetings are every month, but we end up talking almost every day on Facebook about various attempts to prepare for the meeting, and also what's going on our social media, and the best responses that we can make. A lot of us National Committee members are involved in promoting the party on social media, and also the growth in our traditional media, which we haven't talked about as much yet. A big part of the success of the 2020 campaign was yet more coverage in especially Catholic media and evangelical media, as well as lots of other media sources that some of us on the National Committee, along with the presidential candidates, did a lot of work to make happen. So I'll discuss a little bit more about delegates, and I'm always happy to talk to individuals about the very specific differences between the committee and the convention. But the delegates meet only once a year, and when the bylaws changed a couple years ago, they gained a lot of power to set the direction of the party, and the National Committee is meant to implement it. In 2019, our convention of delegates created a new party platform. That's not supposed to be done again until 2023. The 2020 convention, in addition to being the first one to elect the National Committee that way, its biggest accomplishments were creating the Board of Advisors, which is a group of public intellectuals and activists and other notable people who can be advised about setting the direction for the party and gaining connections in various sectors. And so tomorrow, one of our standout Board of Advisors members, Leah Labresco, is going to give a welcoming speech for tomorrow's session. The other big accomplishment for the 2020 convention was the Statement of Principles, which is a much shorter summary of the party's values and beliefs. So the 2021 convention will probably be quite a bit easier. So I encourage many of you to run for delegate. But electing the National Committee is going to be really pivotal. There are going to be a lot of vacancies. I have decided not to run again. And So I would appeal to some of you to consider running for the National Committee as well. There's a lot that needs to be decided. As Zev mentioned, we want to have at least one paid staff member. And so deciding exactly what point we'll be ready for that and how much they should be paid and all that. There's also going to be, we can leave most of it for the vision casting tomorrow, but the regulations for endorsing candidates. So right now we've had a few local officials, you'll hear from Lou Rakowski later, for example, who have decided to become part of our party, even if they're in nonpartisan offices. We're very glad to have Ben Schmitz running as an ASP candidate for Wisconsin State Senate, but how do we decide who is a recognized candidate of the party? Or what if a major party candidate is running with similar values, like we had with Dan Lipinski and John DeBerry as Democrats in 2020? There were a few connections made with them, but they didn't specifically recognize the party while they were running for office. So there's this question of to what extent is the party an end in itself, and to what extent are we in a more of a multi-partisan coalition? So there'll be some key decisions the National Committee may have to make in the next year or so. But a lot of it is making sure that volunteers continue to be welcomed and integrated well, and into their state chapters and into some of the national operations teams. I remember in 2016 when Desmond Silvera, who was on the National Committee at the time, welcomed me at the beginning of of that year's presidential campaign. We need to take in the diversity in all of its forms, the diverse backgrounds of demographics, diversity in the viewpoints across the political spectrum that fit our party's values, and also the very different skills that we all bring to the party. A lot of the people who were volunteers leading up to the Carol Patel campaign and during it are not able to do quite as much volunteer work. I'm still going to be around. I'm going to be doing a lot of the coalition building and curriculum development kind of projects. Most people who have been here will still be around, but we do need new people to not only volunteer but take on leadership. And so I'm happy to answer questions individually about what it's like to be on the National Committee. And or being a delegate, I've been that as well. And yeah, definitely look forward to continuing to work with all of you.
All right, thank you very much, Skylar. That was a great message, and we do hope that many of you will think about ways in which you'll be able to get more involved in the volunteer. Dane, I'd like to turn it over to you for you to talk about the updates in state development.
Okay. I'm Dane. I'm National State Development Director since this summer. I took over that from Amar, had been doing it jointly as chairman, and that was broken out more heavily so that more time can be spent on it. You guys will find this entertaining. Tony was talking about exponential growth in certain states being big. In the course of this meeting, 3 people have joined the party, 1 in Kansas, 1 in Indiana, and another in Illinois. Again, this is exponential growth. If you have a base, you build on that base. Nobody joined from Alaska. Not a surprise, right? We didn't have the base there. But you guys have an opportunity to drive our activity, right? We've got candidates like Ben Schmitz. He's having success because years have been spent building local activity in Wisconsin, so that when Ben stepped up, somewhat by surprise to run, we had the apparatus to leverage to get him there, right? You guys need to spend some time building that activity. Question's how you do it, right? COVID's a challenge. We've had a lot of success with Zoom meetings, right? That's just about getting people to talk, like Amar said in his speech, right? This is a lot of that stuff that was discussed. Apply it locally. I'm going to explain a little bit of the structure of your state chapters if you don't know. So right now, there's two basic structures of state chapters. You have chapters that are elected, accountable to the people in the state, just like the national committee is accountable to the party, right? You have other states that aren't as active, where the leadership is still appointed by the national party, and our goal is to outgrow that. We've got a lot of opportunity. We're seeing growth, but we need to form those connections so we can leverage it and so we can keep people engaged, right? Back to Tony's point about drop off. How do we avoid that drop off? It's by keeping people connected. If people feel there's value in being involved in the party, because you guys, who are specifically members who were engaged enough to come tonight, right? Provide that for the other people who aren't necessarily going to make the extra effort to keep them engaged. I'm going to hop in the chat, give my direct contact information if anybody wants to talk to me. I can either get you hooked up with your current state leadership or get state leadership in your chapter. There's a lot of states, including surprisingly some really big ones with a lot of members like Kansas and Minnesota, that currently have no leadership. So there's definitely opportunities to get that going. And we need to organize it so that we can build on the momentum we have, and prevent that from being a bit of a fizzle, right? I'm going to hand everything back to Albert, and I'm going to hop into the chat box so you guys all have my information.
I appreciate the work you've been doing since the summer to really keep things growing and to handle the growth as a result of the campaign. What I'd like to do now is to just tell you a little bit about one of the ideas that kind of came from talking with different members, and especially on election night, to discuss the idea of how we begin to become a party of governance. The idea that Dane spoke about, having that local input and activism so that people know who you are, so that when you decide to take the leap to run for office, you're known in your community. You know, back during the 80s, you've had this growth in neoliberalism and Margaret Thatcher and others kind of saying that there's no such thing as society. ASP believes that there is society, it's just not the same thing as government. And that part of what we have to do is become the party of civic society, of civic engagement. And one of the initiatives that I've brought up to the National Committee, and I've introduced to some of the states and spoken with North Carolina about, and even my own state here in Virginia, is the idea of mapping our local communities. What I mean by that is, we are a country where we have real democracy. It's not just voting on election day, but democracy is what we do after election day. It's being involved in charities and the Knights of Columbus. Democracy is citizen engagement in commissions and on county committees. It's going and creating social enterprises, that activity of taking governance, if not necessarily government, into your own hands, so that the government doesn't always have to be the leader. It can become the first follower. And this is where ASP members can begin to produce with our philosophy of Christian democracy, of whole life politics, not just by running for office, but by setting the stage for making communities, whole communities, aware of better policy and a better way of living together as neighbors. Imagine, if you will, you're in my county, Fairfax County, Virginia, where there's about 16 to 20 different local county boards that govern everything from youth sports to juvenile detention to policing to domestic shelters, from pollution to organizing libraries and monuments. ASP members can begin to volunteer for those offices, which often in local government don't have many people who are trying to get them. They're not paid, they're not usually that prestigious, but what it does is it gives you a foot in the door, and it gives you a title and responsibility to your community that enables you to begin to go throughout your community and find out what are people's concerns, what's going on. You begin to map out your county and your city and your town and find out what commission handles this, who has authority for that. How many people, when you think about local Republican or Democratic activism, really take time to read their town or county charters and learn how they're organized? How many people really read their state constitutions and learn how power is diffused and distributed? Those are the sorts of things that we do as part of mapping our communities, so that we will understand where we need to begin to bend the arc and the power structure and begin to turn people's ears, begin to focus attention so that we can achieve real policy changes, not just through electoral politics, but being engaged at every level. And then on top of that, we begin to reframe our view of what it means to be neighborly. That when there is a meeting that's going to discuss, building new homes, you go to that meeting, you make your voice heard, and then people begin to say, who are these guys and gals who are going all over town, who are constantly involved and are asking opinions and are offering solutions? And they say, oh, we're the American Solidarity Party. We believe that we're not a party that's just about trying to win and take power, but about finding solutions, even as citizens and civilians who are out of office, and try to make life better for ourselves and for our neighbors. We don't believe in zero-sum politics where someone has to lose in order for us to gain. We believe that if you embrace whole life politics, everyone gains. If you work on fixing the environment, everyone gains. Everyone gains from a better, fair economy. Everyone gains from better, more focused schools. And so if we take that attitude, we begin to show people that our new politics isn't just a watered down version of the Democrats or a watered down version of the Republicans. It's actually something that's radically different. We're subverting the left and the right by choosing alternative politics of moving forward, not to one direction or the other, but going straight ahead towards the future, towards the 21st century, where we're going to have to build more solidarity and neighborliness in the United States so that we can continue to grow and thrive as a society as increasing global competition, increasing threats, atomization, individualism pulling people apart. We see the violence in our streets. If we go forward, the American Solidarity Party has to show a new way of doing democracy. And by mapping our communities and learning where power, whether it's political or economic, learning where problems, where all these things are distributed, and taking ownership of our communities and then eventually our states, we can show people a new way of doing politics. And with that in mind, for the next 40 minutes, we're going to break out into sessions to be led by different leaders to discuss the strategy of how we take the party to the next level and begin to serve our communities by giving everyone something to reach for so that we can be better Americans and better neighbors together and build a better country.